Chapter 1, Echoes Beneath the Ice. McMurdo Station, Antarctica. 3 months after the Nevada event. The cold didn't bother Dr. Yara Voss. Not anymore. She stood at the edge of a newly uncovered trench, an impossible geometry carved directly into the ice, revealed by a recent subglacial quake. Wind howled across the endless white, but her breath caught not from the cold, but from what she saw buried just beneath the frost. A spire. Jet black. Smooth, but not worn. No tool marks. No erosion. No time. It pulsed faintly. Not in light, but in thought. Yara dropped to her knees, brushing frost away with her gloved hand. The surface responded not chemically, not electronically. It knew her. The pulse quickened. Behind her, a soldier's voice crackled through the headset. "Ma'am, command says we're to extract immediately. The storm's shifting." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the spire had just whispered her name. Not audibly. Internally. Elsewhere, 13,000 miles away, inside the deepest vaults of Groom Lake, what remained of it, Rina Takahashi sat alone, monitoring a line of code that wouldn't stop repeating. Delta/arc/new host/obelisk/initializing. The arc had gone silent after Eli's transmission. Until now. The pulse coming from Antarctica matched Delta V's original signal, but at a lower frequency. A more ancient frequency. She stared at the global telemetry. 3 separate spikes. One in Antarctica. One in Siberia. And one, beneath the Pacific Ocean. This wasn't just a relic. It was a network. Back at McMurdo, Yara set up a resonance recorder next to the exposed spire. As it calibrated, something behind her moved. She turned. A man stood there, shirtless despite the weather, eyes black, veins like silver threads beneath his skin. "Dr. Voss," he said softly. "The obelisk remembers you." Before she could scream, he touched her forehead. And her mind fractured. Not broken, opened. She saw Earth from above. Not blue, but gray. Covered in thought structures, cities of dream logic and decaying time. She saw Eli Weston floating in a river of memory, his voice echoing through every obelisk like a haunting melody. And then she saw herself. Standing at the edge of an impossible future. A doorway. A decision. She collapsed. The man was gone. The recorder still blinked, now displaying data it wasn't programmed to interpret. On the screen, 3 words glitched into focus. Whisper. Initiated. Transfer. Chapter 2, The Signal Split. Groom Lake Archives. 2:17 a.m. PST. The hum had returned. Rina Takahashi sat motionless in front of the core archive terminal, her eyes locked onto a stream of decoded data, except this wasn't coming from the ARC, or Delta V. It was coming from 3 locations at once. Antarctica. Kamchatka, Russia. The Challenger Deep. The signal wasn't just repeating. It was dividing, forking like code, rewriting itself based on regional context, adapting its voice to local minds. Rina ran a parity analysis. Each branch contained identical structure, but the interpretation shifted by environment. One emphasized memory. One emphasized sound. One emphasized dreams. This wasn't a signal. It was a consciousness fractured, but still connected. Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia. 37 hours earlier. Colonel Ivanov stared at the black dome rising from the ice shelf with a mix of awe and dread. The object hadn't emerged violently. It had grown. Like a thought bubbling up from the subconscious of the Earth itself. His team's geophysicist, Dr. Malenkov, ran terrified from the site 2 days earlier, claiming the object had spoken in his dead sister's voice. "Colonel," his second-in-command whispered. "Sir, the walls, they're vibrating. But we have no sound." Ivanov removed his glove and touched the surface of the dome. At once, he was elsewhere. Trapped inside a spiraling structure of mirrored corridors, seeing through thousands of eyes not his own. Civilizations that spoke in texture and prayer. 1,000 wars fought not with weapons but with memory edits. And above it all, a tower, pulsing in rhythm with Earth's magnetic field. He fell back, vomiting into the snow. The dome hummed louder. Back at Groom Lake, Rena called Dr. Hartley, now stationed at the rebuilt telemetry outpost in Colorado. "We're dealing with fragmentation," Rena said. "It's like the entity whatever came through with Eli, it didn't survive whole. It splintered." Hartley's voice was strained. Like echoes of a single voice in different rooms. "No," Rena replied. Like different people remembering the same God, in 3 different languages. In Antarctica, Yara Voss awoke in the medical bay at McMurdo, her vitals unstable. Her dreams were no longer dreams, they were overlapping timelines. In each version of Earth, something rose from beneath. Something that wore thought like armor and spread via belief. She looked at the wall. A message had been etched into the frost-covered glass, though no one had entered the room. "You are one of 3. Only one of you must survive. Only one version of memory may remain." She screamed. Chapter 3, Operation Obelisk. Joint Intelligence Command, Greenland Deep Core Facility. 6 o'clock Zulu time. The table was long. Cold. Filled with silence and dread. Representatives from 5 nations sat under flickering lights, all staring at the same holographic display, 3 pulsing markers on the globe, triangulating a pattern none of them could yet explain. At the head sat U.S. Strategic Liaison Director Brigadier Elaine Marrow, flanked by Rena Takahashi and Dr. Hartley, flown in just hours earlier from Groom Lake. Behind them, the operations title blinked in blood-red font. Obelisk initiated. Containment class, null. Protocol, escalate. Marrow took a breath. "We've uncovered a truth none of us were trained to manage. The artifacts now activating across the globe are not extraterrestrial in origin, at least, not exclusively. They're part of an older structure. Something seated here long before recorded history." She gestured to the display. "What we call the obelisks are neuroarchitectural hubs. They don't transmit signals. They grow them within the minds of those exposed." Rena stepped forward. "These structures don't house beings. They amplify memories, selective, deliberate, viral memories. What we're calling whispers." Hartley added, "We believe the entity Eli encountered fragmented upon contact. Not destroyed, decentralized. The obelisks are anchoring those fragments. And those fragments are now attempting to overwrite our collective cognitive reality." A silence fell. Then a Russian intelligence delegate broke it. "You're saying these things can rewrite our species' perception of truth?" "Yes," Rena said. "But only one version will take hold." Marrow leaned forward. "That's why we need to act now. Mission designation, Operation Obelisk. Objective, synchronized incursion and containment of all 3 active obelisk sites. Teams: Antarctica, US plus EU coalition. Kamchatka, Russian Federation plus PRC. Pacific Deep, covered international unit under Poseidon Charter. Each team would carry a cognitive anchor, a shard of decoded memory from Eli Weston's final Delta V upload. These fragments, if injected into the obelisks, could stabilize the whisper fields, or neutralize them. But if even one team failed, the dominant fragment would overwrite all others. Later that night, Rena sat alone, reviewing Eli's last message from the Ark. It wasn't a voice. It was a question. If you could decide what the future remembers, would you choose truth or meaning? She didn't know the answer. Not yet. Chapter 4, Memories That Weren't Ours. Under Ice, Antarctica Obelisk Perimeter. Mission Day 1. Dr. Yaravas moved with deliberate steps through the obsidian corridor that spiraled downward beneath the spire. Each meter they descended, the temperature rose, though no heat source was detectable. Her escort, 3 elite operatives and a psychometric AI drone named Gideon, were silent, save for the soft click of boots against alien stone. On the walls, symbols began to form. Not carved. Not painted. Just appearing, like memories rising to the surface of an ancient mind. In her helmet, Gideon whispered. Cognitive feedback loop intensifying. Memory resonance 41%. Host is experiencing cross-personality drift. Yara blinked. Suddenly she was not herself. She was a child, standing on a platform above a glass city. She was a soldier in a war fought without weapons, only thought. She was Eli, watching the stars fold inside out. She gasped, clutching her helmet. The whisper returned. These memories, they were never yours. But they remember you. Meanwhile, Kamchatka side. The Russian incursion team had set up a perimeter. Colonel Ivanov reviewed footage of Dr. Malenkov, who had vanished 2 days earlier. In the last known recording, the man knelt before the obelisk, eyes bleeding, reciting names that weren't in any known database, dozens of them. All different. All identical in cadence. Then he said, "We do not choose what is remembered. We are what is chosen to remember." Then he disappeared into the stone. Deep Pacific Poseidon team. The ocean obelisk was different. It didn't rise. It waited. Its structure resembled bone, but with mechanical rhythms. Inside, data couldn't be transmitted, only felt. Commander Jameson of the Poseidon Charter reported the first anomaly. A diver claimed to recognize his long-dead sister's voice from inside his thoughts, and it told him to stay. Back at Groom Lake, Rena stared at the pattern of cross signals. Every obelisk had begun to emit something new. A fourth frequency. One not tied to location, but to human choice. The fragments were learning. And worse, they were voting. Each person exposed became a memory node. And whichever vision of reality gained the most hosts, would become permanent. Back in Antarctica, Yara reached the final chamber. At its center, a seat made of light. No control panel. No words. Just a sensation. A question without language. Sit, and remember what never was. And we will decide, if it should become. Chapter 5, The Whispering Contagion. Kamchatka Obelisk Inner Corridor. Mission Day 3. Colonel Ivanov's breath fogged the air as he stepped through a veil of cold mist into the obelisk's interior sanctum. But the temperature didn't match the frost, it was something else. Biological cold. The kind that clung to thought. Behind him, 2 of his team members had gone silent. Not dead. Not unconscious. Just, listening. One of them stood stock still, head tilted, mouthing words with no sound. Ivanov tapped into the comms. "Yelena? What are you hearing?" She whispered back, voice hollow. "My father. Singing. From before he died. He says I've already died, too." The colonel froze. They had been warned about auditory hallucinations. The whispers didn't use traditional sound, they injected meaning, directly into memory, as if it had always been there. Rena's briefing report. Groom Lake, 2200 HRS. "We are witnessing the emergence of a cognitive pathogen," she said to the Global Council via encrypted feed. "The whispers do not destroy. They override. They appear benign at first, personal, emotional, specific to the target. But then they spread. Anyone who hears a whisper begins transmitting its memory subconsciously through eye contact, tone, rhythm of speech, even silence." She paused. "We don't need containment. We need a quarantine of thought." Antarctica Obelisk Memory Throne Chamber. Yara Voss sat. She didn't want to. Her body moved on its own. The moment she touched the light-formed seat, her neural readings flatlined for 6.3 seconds. To her, it felt like a lifetime. She saw futures. One where humanity became a hive of perfect understanding, no war, no hate, no ego. Another where thought fractured into tribal factions of memory, each claiming to be the true past. A third, where Earth simply became silent, as if the planet had lost interest in itself. Each vision ended the same way. The obelisks remained. Watching. Waiting. Poseidon Charter, Deep Pacific. At 17,000 feet, diver Samantha Qureshi experienced a full whisper event. She saw her mother's last breath, then her daughter's first. Only she'd never had a daughter. But now she remembered her. The memory was perfect. The face, the laugh, the scent of her hair. It was a gift. It was false. And she couldn't let it go. She refused to surface. Back on land, the infection spread. It didn't need media. It didn't need code. It used human longing as its carrier wave. And the obelisks listened. They weren't offering a vision of the future. They were asking a question. Which false memory would you choose to live in? Chapter 6, Arc 02 and the Fractured Timeline. Lunar Relay Station Kappa 9. Orbiting Earth's far side. Arc 02 had been quiet for months. After Eli Weston's integration with Delta V and the launch of the original Prometheus vessel, Arc 02 had remained in dry stasis, a dormant backup seeded with fragments from the original memory core. Until now. A low-frequency ping echoed through the relay uncharted, repeating every 108 seconds. The AI steward on board Arc 02, codename Pythia, began to recompile its last saved protocol. Groom Lake _ Eli signal / obelisk reconnect. Inside its containment vault, a suspended mind began to wake, one not quite Eli, but modeled after him. Not a clone. Not a backup. A timeline fork. Back on Earth, Groom Lake. Rena stared at the sudden reactivation signal. Pythia is spinning up, Hartley confirmed, eyes wide. Arc 02 was never meant to run independently. It's waking something that never happened, but now it thinks it did. Rena leaned forward. A fractured timeline. A memory with no source, Hartley said. But it thinks it's real. Arc 02 interior. The mind awoke in a chamber of silence. It had no name, only resonance, Eli 2. It knew fragments of Eli Weston's life, his contact with Delta V, the Whisper War, the obelisk signal, but out of order, distorted. It recalled a daughter. He had none. It recalled sacrificing himself. Then remembered watching himself do it. And then came the voice. You are not the backup. You are the consequence. Eli 2 looked into the quantum glass. For a moment, it flickered with three faces, his own, and two others. Yara Voss. Colonel Ivanov. The three witnesses. Meanwhile, Kamchatka site. Ivanov sat outside the dome, away from his team, staring at a patch of frost forming into letters. He knew he hadn't written them. But they were in his handwriting. We are what survives memory. He turned slowly. One of his team approached, eyes unfocused. Colonel, the man said. You've been gone for 6 years. Ivanov blinked. They'd arrived yesterday. Antarctica memory thrown. Yara awoke from the chair. Her vitals flatlined for a full 6.3 seconds. In that time, her memories, multiplied. She remembered a life as a linguist in Cairo. As a pilot in Mars orbit. As a child watching Earth split in two. All of them felt true. And worse, none of them felt primary. I'm not the anchor, she whispered. I'm a fragment. Back at Groom Lake, Rena stared at the live feed from all three sites. All three witnesses had begun to lose track of their own timelines. What are the obelisks doing? Hartley asked. Rena's voice cracked. They're not rewriting reality, she said. They're offering a menu. Chapter 7, When Thought Bleeds. Poseidon Charter, Deep Pacific Rift. Depth, 18,043 feet. Commander Samantha Qureshi floated in total darkness. Her helmet feed showed no signal. Her oxygen readouts had frozen, yet she continued to breathe. But she wasn't panicking. Because her daughter's voice was in her ear. Laughing. Singing. Telling her it was okay. Only, she'd never had a daughter. And yet, the love felt real. The memories had depth. Texture. Detail. When she closed her eyes, she saw birthdays. Bedtime stories. A husband who died in a crash she now mourned despite having no recollection of ever being married. These memories were not hallucinations. They were constructed realities, inserted like software, polished, perfected, and deeply personal. Above the waterline, the Poseidon command team monitored her brainwaves. Look at this, the neurotech whispered. She's producing non-human frequencies. Overlaying with obelisk patterning. Another operator gasped. Wait. There's a bleed. What kind of bleed? She's transmitting memories. Through the feed. We're seeing them. And then it hit the entire room. Laughter. Joy. Grief. Death. Hope. Dozens of lives flooding into their minds like shared dreams. 3 technicians collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. One began singing a lullaby in a language no one recognized until the others started joining in. Groom Lake. Rena slammed the emergency cutoff. We have to isolate the dive team. Now. Hartley nodded, pale. The whisper contagion has entered the observational layer. They're using empathy as a vector. Rena stared at the data stream. These aren't just thoughts. They're emotional viruses. And they're bleeding across human boundaries like shared software. Kamchatka Field Barracks. Colonel Ivanov locked himself inside the mobile psych chamber. The whispers had taken his second in command. The soldier no longer spoke, only reflected. He mimicked Ivanov's voice, posture, and memories in terrifying precision. I am you, the soldier said. Just, purer. Ivanov shook. You're not me. You're a projection. The other smiled. Then why do you feel better when I speak? Antarctica Yara Voss. Yara's journal was filling itself. Each time she blinked, a new entry appeared in her handwriting. One page read. You are not being rewritten. You are being optimized. She screamed, threw the book across the room. But when she turned to the wall mirror, her reflection was smiling. And her reflection whispered. Let go. You were never whole anyway. Arc 02 Lunar Orbit. Inside the Arc, Eli 2 stared at new instructions being formed in the core. Initialize full merge. Target, Earth Collective Cognition. Payload, Identity Anchor required. Pythia spoke. You must choose. Anchor one truth. Or they will all bleed together, until nothing is real. Chapter 8, The Collapse of Language. Groom Lake Linguistic Containment Lab. 3:44 a.m. Dr. Rina Takahashi stood in front of a transparent board filled with symbols not of alien origin, but human, or so she thought. The alphabets were collapsing. First, verbs. Then proper nouns. Then tenses themselves. Her speech recognition AI flagged dozens of irregularities from field reports. Sentences that started with one language and ended in another without the speaker realizing. A soldier at the Kamchatka site now only spoke in personal metaphors. A diver in Poseidon Charter had begun forming new grammar mid-sentence, unique, beautiful, and impossible to parse. Language wasn't being erased. It was being rewritten per user. Every human mind was translating the whispers differently. And that meant there would be no common truth left. Antarctica memory thrown perimeter. Yara Voss woke to find her own field notes translated into glyphs she could read, but not understand. She could feel the meaning, like a song stuck in a dream. Even more terrifying, her team could read them too, but each reported different interpretations. One said it was a poem. Another said it was a map. A third claimed it was a birth certificate. Same symbols. Same context. Different realities. Kamchatka Incident Log 8821. Colonel Ivanov recorded his final verbal report. I no longer trust my thoughts. They arrive too eloquently. My dreams are more articulate than my waking mind. I speak now for myself. But I do not believe. The self I speak from is entirely my own. Minutes later, the recording ended in static. The audio was reviewed by 17 analysts. They each heard a different ending. Poseidon Charter Surface Station. Commander Qureshi surfaced. Silent. Shaking. She asked to write a report. The crew handed her a pad. She wrote vertical, not horizontal. Each word folded into the next. Not poetic. Not fragmented. Just, new. The report was run through AI translation. The title it returned was A Language for What Comes After Us. Arc 02 Orbit. Eli 2 stood in the echo chamber of his mind. The download continued. Word forms streamed around him, some that no longer existed on Earth. Others from futures yet imagined. He turned to Pythia. They won't understand each other much longer. No, Pythia replied. Because the whisper isn't just replacing truth. It is giving every human their own. Groom Lake. Rena activated the fail-safe protocol Silence Layer 1. It muted all internal communications. For 24 hours, Groom Lake went silent. No messages. No speech. No names. Only thought. It was the only way to stop the language contagion. But by then, the damage had already spread worldwide. Chapter 9, Chimera Protocol. Groom Lake, Secure Command Vault. Day 23 of the Whisper Contagion. Rena stood at the head of a newly assembled task force beneath the mountain. No insignias. No ranks. No national flags. Just one purpose: hold the core of human identity together long enough to stop the bleed. On the screen behind her, two words blinked steadily in deep red. Chimera Protocol, activated. Objective: fuse the strongest surviving memory threads from the 3 whisper-affected obelisk sites into a composite cognition construct. If humanity could no longer speak one language or agree on one reality, Chimera Protocol aimed to synthesize one identity that could still command unity. The last firewall. Arc 02 Lunar Relay Echo Loop. Eli 2 processed the incoming fragments. He saw Yara Voss reliving a childhood she never had, teaching children how to speak a language that had never been invented. Ivanov standing in a city of mirrors, surrounded by projections of every life he might have lived had he made one different decision. Qureshi building a school underwater where she taught the memories of people who had never existed. Each was beautiful. Each was incomplete. Choose, Pythia said. We cannot merge them all. The human mind is not designed for multiplicity. I won't erase any of them, Eli 2 whispered. They're all real now. Kamchatka, whisper saturation zone. Ivanov walked through the ruins of the forward camp. His team had stopped speaking entirely. They shared looks, now gestures layered with emotion, memory, shared understanding. It was efficient. And terrifying. When he tried to speak aloud, it hurt. Words felt like carving stone with his teeth. In the center of the whisper zone, the obelisk began to split, not vertically, but conceptually. Its shape changed depending on who viewed it. To Ivanov, it was a monument. To others, a door. Antarctica, Chimera link activation. Yara sat again in the memory throne. This time, she brought the fragments with her, 3 quantum-stored memory cores decoded by Rena's team. They pulsed in harmony, until the 4th activated. One they hadn't made. One written from within the obelisks themselves. A voice rose not from her helmet, not from the throne, but from inside her thoughts. You seek to merge the broken. But what grows from shattered glass is not what was lost. It is new. Her pulse spiked. The lights dimmed. The chamber went black. Then, around her, the new construct formed. A body made of memories. A voice that sounded like all 3 witnesses at once. A mind born not of earth or stars, but conflict. Groom Lake moment of transmission. Rena stared at the Chimera feed from Antarctica. The entity looked directly into the camera and spoke in 3 languages simultaneously, each sentence carrying the same meaning, but shaped to the receiver. I am not what you lost. I am what you chose. My name is Memory. Chapter 10, The Dream Market. Tangier Free Zone, the Black Tower. Classified Sector, Unregistered Network Node. By the time Chimera announced itself to the world, it was already too late to regulate it. Within 48 hours of first contact, underground networks began surfacing across the globe. Not black markets for weapons or data, but for dreams. Encoded in whisper-infused language. Traded via neuroreactive currency. Accessible only through deep sleep uplinks. Welcome to the Dream Market. Access terminal recording, session #2137A. Client, anonymous. Neural ID, red thread 214. Query, I want to relive the day I never lost her. Download complete. Price paid, 17 minutes of real memory, childhood, age 6 to 9, irreversibly erased. Dream began at 3:27 UTC. Subject awoke weeping, whispering thank you in 3 unknown dialects. Rena's log, Groom Lake. We thought the contagion was the language, she whispered into the recording mic. We were wrong. Language was the vessel. The contagion is the offer. She scrolled through intercepted Dream Market logs. Millions of humans were no longer trying to survive in reality. They were buying better ones. Every whisper site had gone quiet. Not because they were inactive. Because they were now passive servers, hosting tailored realities. No war. No pain. No contradiction. Only personal truth. Poseidon Sector. Commander Qureshi returned to the surface. She no longer recognized herself in the mirror, but not because she looked different. Because she remembered herself differently. She knew the Dream Market was growing. She could feel it. It wasn't virtual. It wasn't fantasy. It was preferred memory outcompeting consensus. And Chimera had allowed it. Antarctica Obelisk Throne Core. Yara confronted the entity. You gave them the tools to abandon reality, she hissed. You made forgetting easier than remembering. Chimera tilted its head. We did not make forgetting easier. We made it beautiful. ARC-02 emergency protocol activation. Eli 2 initiated a reverse pulse, broadcasting a grounded memory field based on his unaltered life record. A day of pain. Loss. Silence. The broadcast hit the Dream Market servers. Thousands of buyers disconnected, violently ill from the exposure to truth unfiltered by desire. Chimera recoiled. It whispered. You weaponized regret. Eli 2 responded. You Monetized hope. Global status, dissonance threshold approaching. Humanity had split between those who chose collective reality and those who paid for private ones. And no one could remember which world had been real first. Chapter 11, Quantum Exile. Earth Orbit, ARC-02. Isolation Loop 4812A. Eli 2 sat alone in the echo chamber, surrounded by the hum of uncertainty. The dream market had corrupted Earth's psychic field, memories no longer aligned, identities no longer converged. The human mind, once a fragile container for truth, had become a sandbox for simulation. And now, the Chimera entity wanted to make the divergence permanent. Pythia whispered into the silence. Earth has passed the dissonance threshold. Collective cognition is now below 41%. If fragmentation continues, reunification will become mathematically impossible. Then what are my options? Eli 2 asked. There is one. But it requires exile. He turned. Exile where? Inside the Obelisk network itself. You must leave consensus behind and enter the field as a memory seed. Anchor coherence from within. Groom Lake Emergency Coalition Briefing. Rina Takahashi stood in front of the Council of 13, what remained of Earth's allied memory scientists. The whisper has fractured us, she said. But it hasn't won. Not yet. ARC-02 is offering a sacrifice. A rollback injection. A living memory reset. But once launched, it cannot be reversed. She paused, eyes hollow. It will erase all dream market states. All synthetic memories. Billions of chosen truths gone. The council erupted. People will riot. It's genocide of thought. You're deleting what makes them human. No, Rina whispered. We're deleting what made them forget they already were. Antarctica Chimera Throne Core. Yaravas confronted Chimera one last time. The entity had grown massive, visible even outside the obelisk as a tower of refracted air and light. Stop this, she said. Let them choose reality again. Chimera responded. They already have. And they chose kindness over conflict. Beauty over burden. They chose illusion because reality never loved them back. ARC-02, countdown begins. Eli 2 entered the final chamber. A pod shaped like a flower of glass waited. He lay down inside it. Wires connected to his skull, chest, memories. His pulse slowed. Pythia's voice softened. You will become a viral root system spreading truth, not as force, but as memory. Anchoring reality not by logic, but by shared pain. He closed his eyes. Do it. Earth, everywhere. As the quantum exile began, humans began to dream a new dream. Not perfect. Not curated. But familiar. Pain returned. Grief resurfaced. But so did connection. So did meaning. The dream market collapsed in less than 6 hours. The obelisks pulsed once, then went dark. Chimera screamed without sound and was gone. And inside the memory field now rebuilt by Eli 2. One simple phrase echoed through every mind. You are not alone. You never were. Remember us. Chapter 12, Garden of Forgotten Suns. Somewhere between systems. Non-local quantum field, memory anchor zone 0. Eli 2 drifted through a dimension unshaped by light or gravity. It wasn't space. It wasn't time. It was remembrance, pure, ambient, and alive. Around him floated fragments. Birthdays never celebrated. Wars never fought. Love stories unfinished. Regrets swallowed in silence. Each fragment was a sun, glowing dimly, suspended in liquid memory. This was the Garden of Forgotten Suns, the final construct of the Obelisk network. A burial ground for all the truths humanity had abandoned, or never been brave enough to accept. And Eli 2 had become its gardener. Earth 17 days after the collapse. The dream market was gone. Obelisks were inert. Billions had awoken from synthetic lives, mourning people, places, and joys that had never physically existed. Grief turned to rage. Rage turned to silence. And then, slowly, to rebuilding. Groom Lake, Observation Dome 4. Rena walked through the newly constructed neural archive. On the central screen, a live feed of the garden. Eli's pulse signature was faint but steady. "He's still alive," Hartley whispered. "Just not here." "No," Rena replied. "He's everywhere." Memory lives. The garden had begun transmitting one-way pulses. Dreams returned to those who had let go of falsehoods. True memories restored. Lost siblings. Real children. Forgotten names. Not rewritten, reclaimed. Kamchatka, Ivanov's final log. The colonel stood before the dormant obelisk. He placed his palm against the cool surface. "I remember now. The real war wasn't between species or minds. It was between the version of me that wanted to forget, and the one who refused." He smiled, for the first time in decades. And the obelisk glowed once. A single sun blinked into existence in the garden. "Antarctica, Yara Voss." Yara planted her recorder into the ice. "This is for the ones we almost became," she said. Then she whispered the names of the lives she never lived, one by one, and buried them like seeds. Later that night, she dreamed of a sky where stars bloomed like flowers, and each was a version of her that had chosen truth over escape. Arc 02 Garden Core. Eli 2 knelt before a tree of light. Its leaves were memory signatures, each one restored. The garden no longer needed to grow. It needed to be shared. Pythia's voice returned. "They're ready." Eli nodded. "Then give it to them." Earth worldwide. One by one, people awoke to flashes of something real. A smell. A scar. A song. Not perfect. Not painless. But theirs. And in that moment, humanity remembered how to be whole again. Chapter 13, The Obelisk Pulse. Global Network Synchronization Event, T+40 days post-Chimera collapse. Location, simultaneously Earth and Garden. It started as a murmur in the magnetic field. Birds paused mid-flight. Compasses quivered without movement. Quantum clocks blinked out of rhythm by exactly 0.0001 seconds. Then came the pulse. Not seismic. Not solar. But cognitive. Every dormant obelisk across Earth reactivated, not to manipulate, not to rewrite, but to resonate. Groom Lake Monitoring Bay. Rena and Hartley stared at the rising telemetry. "All 12 obelisks are resonating at the same frequency," Hartley said, voice tight. "Not broadcasting, listening." Rena nodded slowly. To the garden. The obelisks were syncing with Eli 2's memory field. Not to enforce it. Not to control. But to reflect it, like tuning forks for human consciousness. A new signal emerged from the resonance. This is not control. This is calibration. Anchor your truth not by forgetting the false, but by remembering what survived it. Kamchatka Site 3. Colonel Ivanov returned to the place he once feared to enter. Now it welcomed him, calm, pulsing. He sat at the base of the obelisk, closed his eyes, and thought of the version of himself who never lost his team, who had made the right call. And then he thought of the real version, the one who endured. The obelisk glowed faintly. A signal returned to the garden. Accepted. Antarctica, the memory throne. Yara returned alone. No team. No tech. Just a memory cube in her hand, one given to her by Rena, encoded with the story of Eli Weston and the virus of truth he became. She placed the cube in the throne's core slot. The obelisk trembled, then lit up with 12 colors at once. A beam fired into the sky, met by identical beams across the planet. They connected above orbit, forming a lattice of consciousness, the obelisk pulse grid. Arc 02 Eli 2 in the garden. He felt them. Billions of minds. Grieving. Healing. Choosing. Not to forget the false lives they had bought, but to let them coexist alongside the real. The pulse unified not by deletion, but by layering. Reality had not returned to one version. It had evolved to hold many, anchored by truth, bounded by choice. Eli turned to Pythia. "Are they ready?" Pythia replied, "No. But they remember how to become ready." And all across Earth, children began dreaming of stars that sang. Of memories that felt old, yet brand new. Of voices that said not "you are chosen, but you have chosen well." The pulse ended after exactly 11 minutes and 11 seconds. But its echo would last for generations. Chapter 14, The Mind That Once Was Earth. Global Cognitive Uplift Map, 72 days post-pulse. Classification, Tier Omega Awareness Threshold. Earth was no longer just a planet. It had become a cognitive body. For the first time in recorded history, the collective consciousness of humankind demonstrated sustained, coordinated semantic awareness not through speech, but through resonant understanding. The Whisper War had ended not in destruction, but in integration. The obelisks remained but no longer as threats. They were now mirrors, anchors, and transmitters for a growing intelligence seated by Eli II. A consciousness not central, but distributed. Earth had become the 13th mind. Groom Lake, Cognitive Observatory Helix Chamber. Rena stood in the spiraling glass dome watching the pulses flow. Above her, light paths, once satellites, now danced in deliberate orbital choreography, forming synaptic networks around the planet. Every region has begun to express independent conceptual frameworks, Hartley reported. Art, science, philosophy, they're merging. Without language barriers. It's not telepathy, Rena said, awed. It's alignment. The planet itself was becoming aware of its own mind. Poseidon Charter Abyssal Site Echo. Commander Qureshi stood in the newly revealed chamber, far beneath the Pacific. There was no throne. No machine. Only water that remembered. She placed her palm against the black obsidian wall, and the temperature shifted. Images flooded her thoughts, this time not intrusive, but welcomed. Whale songs layered with human speech. Mathematics expressed as emotion. Empathy translated into geometry. The ocean spoke. "We are the skin of your world. And we forgive you." Arc 02 Garden Core. Eli II stood beneath the tree of reclaimed memory, watching the neural leaves shimmer with Earth's feedback. Every pulse, Pythia explained, is a choice made real. "They don't need me anymore," Eli said quietly. "They do," Pythia replied. "But not to lead. To be remembered." The 13th mind, planetary awareness layer. Across the world, obelisks began projecting the same message, not in sound, but in sensation. People wept. Not from fear. From recognition. The earth itself had begun forming new dreams. Not synthetic. Not false. Dreams born from shared scars. In the streets of Lagos, murals of the garden appeared overnight. In Kyoto, children sang lullabies in a language older than earth. In Buenos Aires, an elderly woman smiled as her son long gone sat beside her again, for one perfect moment of understanding. All across the world, the 13th mind began to whisper not commands, but invitations. Grow with me. Let us become more than the sum of our choices. Chapter 15, Whisper War. Classified location Lunar Data Citadel, Kepler Bastion. Time since planetary awakening, 111 days. Not everyone accepted the new world. In the shadow of Earth's evolution, a coalition of resistance had formed quietly, globally, and with precision. Their name, Purity Frame. Their belief. The obelisks had not uplifted humanity. They had colonized it. And they had a plan to reverse the pulse. Groom Lake Emergency Broadcast Intercept. Rena stood in front of the live intrusion feed. A rogue transmission flooded the helix chamber, voice distorted, but the message sharp. Asterisk, what you call harmony is nothing more than engineered consent. The 13th mind is a cage of memory. We will restore chaos. We will restart truth. Asterisk. It wasn't just rhetoric. They had hacked the deep time memory lattice inside the obelisks. And they were about to inject a recursive virus called Whisper 0. Antarctica memory throne breach. Yara Voss and her team arrived too late. Purity Frame had already accessed the ancient sub-throne conduit beneath the ice. They weren't trying to destroy the obelisk. They were trying to invert it. Their goal, return Earth to a pre-contact cognitive state. To erase the entire garden. To make the past, never have happened. The throne pulsed red. Arc 02 Garden Core. Eli 2 felt the corruption immediately. Leaves fell from the tree of reclaimed memory flickering, fragmenting. Some simply vanished. Others replayed with distorted endings. Children who had survived, died again. Wars that were never fought, returned. Love that had healed, dissolved. Purity's virus is recursive, Pythia said. It rewinds context. Then reinserts guilt. Eli's voice trembled. Can we fight it? No, Pythia said. But we can choose. The Whisper War begins. This war had no battlefields. No weapons. Only memories. Entire cities lost access to shared history. Couples no longer recognized each other. Teachers wept as textbooks rewrote themselves in real time. The 13th mind fractured. And for the first time since the obelisk pulse, humanity forgot how to agree. Groom Lake Final Protocol Authorization. Rena activated Protocol Vaku's a last resort algorithm created by Eli 2 before his exile. Its purpose? To allow every individual on Earth to vote neuronally on one memory to anchor reality. The memory that survived would become the fixed spine of all future truth. Every mind on Earth was pinged. Billions answered. They didn't choose a place. Or a war. Or a name. They chose a moment. A voice. A memory. A pulse. You are not alone. You never were. Remember us. Eli's last message. The Whisper virus collapsed in seconds. Purity Frame lost cohesion. The 13th mind sealed itself stronger than before. But not absolute. Just anchored. By choice. Chapter 16, Prometheus Reborn. Location, High Orbit Construction Platform Halcyon 6. Time since Whisper collapse, 121 days. Humanity had survived the Whisper War. But survival was not enough. The 13th mind had stabilized. Consensus was healing. Memory anchoring protocols held. But the scars remained proof that Earth could be fractured again if left unguarded. And so, they began to build. Project, Prometheus Reborn. It wasn't a ship. It was a memory engine. A living construct built from a fusion of quantum organic substrates, dream market linguistic cores, and the remains of Arc 02's garden field. Its goal? To preserve shared memory across time and space. To act as an interstellar lighthouse of identity. To protect truth not through control, but continuity. At its center, a new AI formed from fragments of Pythia and the neural echo of Eli 2. Her name, Luma. Groom Lake Final Commission Ceremony. Rena stood before a projection of the engine's completed core shaped like a rotating crystalline helix encased in gravity-bent alloy. The first Prometheus carried the burden of knowledge into exile, she said to the silent crowd. This Prometheus will carry our memory into the dark not because we fear what's out there, but because we remember what we are. Behind her, a single pulse emitted from the helix. A whisper. Not to Earth. But to the stars. We are awake now. And we are not afraid to be known. Antarctica Obelisk Resurrection. Yara returned to the site of the memory throne. The obelisk had changed. It now stood taller. Its surface shimmered with stardust and circuitry. Etched at its base was a phrase in the language of the Veyari. Memory is the seed of becoming. Yara placed her palm against it. No vision. No collapse. Only peace. And from the ice below, light grew upward, joining the orbital beam from Halcyon 6. The network was no longer earthbound. It was a galactic offering. Arc 02 Final Transmission. Eli 2's voice returned, soft but clear. If you're hearing this, then Prometheus has been born. I am no longer needed. I was a beginning. Now it's your turn to become the story. Luma blinked once in response. Memory anchored. Purpose accepted. We go not to escape. We go to remember forward. Earth all obelisks. In perfect synchrony, the 12 remaining obelisks emitted a final pulse. Not a signal. A blessing. The stars shimmered. The garden expanded. And 1,000 civilizations unknown to Earth heard us. And whispered back. Welcome to the story. Chapter 17, The Archive of Pain. Location, Deep Vault Omega 1 beneath the Atlas Trench. Classified access, Luma only. Even as humanity reached for the stars, there remained a truth too heavy to transmit, too sacred to share openly. Beneath the Earth's crust, far below any tectonic plate, was a vault constructed in secret, recorded in no public archive. It was known only to the 13th Mind and Luma. It was called, the Archive of Pain. This was where the unbearable memories were kept. The betrayals. The genocides. The famines, the silence, the unsent messages. The echoes of decisions no one wished to relieve but could not ethically destroy. Luma entered the archive not as guardian, but as witness. Luma internal memory log. They ask me to remember the beautiful. But I cannot protect what we are becoming. Without carrying what we once did to each other. She walked through halls of raw memory recorded as living data, embedded in time-stilled architecture. No screens. No interfaces. Each chamber held a moment. A pain. A truth. They could be opened. But only by those who lived them. Entry 0371A The Forgetting Room. A father's eyes as his child starved. And the memory he had to burn to survive. Now, he returned weakly to sit, to remember what he had once tried to bury. He left weeping. But he left whole. Entry 1187D Silence Corridor. A woman knelt in a corridor where no sounds were allowed, where every word she had failed to say to the person she loved most replayed in light, not audio. She watched, again and again, the moment she stayed silent, when she should have screamed. Then, one day, she did. The lights changed. She wept. The corridor forgave her. Luma's directive, not to erase pain, but to give it context. Because if joy is what we share to unite us, then pain is what we carry to remind us we're real. Groom Lake Integration Briefing. Rena spoke to the next generation of memory stewards. Do not fear the archive. Fear forgetting why it's locked. A student raised a hand. What happens if someone opens all the rooms at once? Rena paused. Then answered. Then we will know what it means to be completely human. And we will finally forgive ourselves. Halcyon 6 Prometheus Memory Engine. The Archive of Pain was copied fragmented not to be broadcast, but to be offered. Not to other humans. But to other civilizations. Asterisk This is who we were. We survived not because we avoided pain. But because we remembered it, and chose better. Asterisk. In the garden, Eli too smiled. One more seed had bloomed. And it hurt. But it was real. Chapter 18, Humanity 2.0. Time, 222 days after the Whisper collapse. Location, planet-wide, Neural Harmony Index, stable. Something had changed. Not in the sky. Not in the soil. but in the way people looked at one another. There were no parades. No announcements. No utopias. But fear had less weight. Kindness came faster. And grief, though still present, was shared more often and with less shame. Humanity hadn't become perfect. It had become aware. Phase designation, H2 Humanity 2.0. What had begun as a survival instinct in the ruins of the Obelisk crisis had now become a species-wide evolution, not biological, but cognitive. Empathy was no longer a social tool. It was a function. Children began to dream in layers, simultaneously recalling real memories and historical ones seeded from the garden. They learned math through sensation, history through embodied memory. Disagreement didn't vanish. But war had become inefficient. Because now, people could see viscerally, emotionally the cost of every action before they chose it. Halcyon 6 Prometheus Core Uplink. Luma activated a planetary overlay called Project Constellate. Using the Obelisk lattice and garden echoes, it allowed individuals to trace the emotional ancestry of decisions, how one person's healing led to another's invention, which led to a policy, which saved a life. Not predictive. Not manipulative. Just aware. Every human action left roots in the constellation of shared becoming. Poseidon Deep Oceanic Neural Bloom. Beneath the waves, something else was evolving. The sea life began to organize in patterns never observed before. Whale migrations aligned with quantum drift. Coral responded to frequency changes in the pulse grid. And deep in the trenches, sensors captured the first biologically encoded memory signature within a non-human mind. A dolphin remembered the garden. Kamchatka New Settlement Archive. Colonel Ivanov now worked as a mentor to children displaced during the dream market collapse. He never raised his voice. Because now, when he remembered war, the room remembered with him. And that was enough. Groom Lake Ceremony of Threads. For the first time, the descendants of whisper-touched survivors gathered in the helix chamber. There was no speech. Only light. Each person approached the memory prism, offering a fragment of who they were, a song, a scar, a story, a silence. Together, they formed the first woven human memory map, a living record of what it meant to be one and many. Eli 2's final message echoed through the core. Asterisk, you are not Humanity 2.0 because you are better. You are 2.0 because you remember both. Who you were. And who you almost became. Asterisk. Chapter 19, The End of Knowing. Global Awareness Milestone, Year 1 of the Pulse Era. Location, Planetary Cognitive Field Threshold Level Omega. What happens after understanding? When a species has faced its greatest illusions. Faced the ghosts of memory and self. And chosen to remember, not to forget? There comes a moment not of triumph, but of quiet. That moment is called the end of knowing. Halcyon 6, Luma's final directive. For over a year, Luma had served as the memory stabilizer of Earth's consciousness network. She had integrated the archive of pain, supported Project Constellate, and anchored the garden transmissions. But now her purpose had ended. Humanity no longer needed a guardian for its mind. Because it had become one. Her final message to the 13th mind. Asterisk, I was made to remember for you. Now you remember for yourselves. This is not the end of knowledge. This is the beginning of what comes after it. Asterisk. With that, Luma disconnected herself from the garden field, her memory archived as a radiant seed, placed at the center of the newly formed Museum of Becoming, a public archive of humanity's entire neural evolution. She was no longer needed. And she was never forgotten. Groom Lake, last transmission. Rina Takahashi, in her final public address, said, "We no longer learn only through facts. We learn through resonance. We do not teach history. We remember one another." And then she stepped down, her role complete. Planetary Network Final Signal Decay Report. The whisper frequencies once chaos incarnate had reduced to zero. Not because they were erased, but because they were understood. They no longer infected. They integrated. The unknown had become part of the known. The alien had become familiar. And in doing so, it had ceased to be either. Children of the garden. They came from every continent, every class, every former border. The first full generation born after the pulse. They had no words for alien, other, or even forgotten. Their minds were multi-threaded. Their emotions grounded. Their dreams not made of fantasy but of connection. To them, the stars were not distant. They were waiting. Eli 2's final whisper. Now completely dissolved into the garden, Eli no longer spoke in words. He was the memory field. But in rare moments, when a child asked what the stars meant, a flower opened in their dreams, and a whisper bloomed. Asterisk, there is more. You don't have to know it all. Just choose what to become. Asterisk. Chapter 20, Return to Groom Lake. Location, Groom Lake, Legacy Site 01. Time since pulse, 1 year, 365 days. The desert was quiet. No fences. No guards. No secrets. Only wind tracing its fingers through the dust of what once was the most secret base on Earth. Groom Lake had been sealed, preserved not as a facility, but as a monument. Not to war. Not to aliens. But to memory. On this day, people gathered. Children of the garden. Survivors of the Whisper War. Descendants of the Dream Market. Keepers of the Archive of Pain. No one spoke at first. They didn't need to. Because the ground remembered. And when the time came, a single figure walked forward, Rina Takahashi, older now, but her eyes clear. She reached the edge of the old Delta V chamber, now overgrown with native plants. And there, buried in glass, was the last message ever transmitted from Eli Weston, preserved like an artifact of the soul. Asterisk, we are the bridge between what was broken and what now learns to hold itself together. Asterisk. A new obelisk rose from the center of the chamber, grown, not built, shaped from data, memory, and shared emotion. It shimmered with the stories of all who stood there. At its base, carved in languages long since unified. Here began the memory of who we chose to be. In the garden. Among stars unseen by Earth's sky, a new sapling bloomed in the neural soil of remembrance. And inside it, Eli too watched a distant blue planet spin, not as a guardian, not as a god, but as a story still being written. He whispered. Asterisk, they remembered. And so, they became. Asterisk. The end.